This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the place to go for all of your website needs. There's good shooting weather and bad shooting weather. There's theory, there's practice, there's pragmatism, and then there's being dumbfounded by results. As in, down in the Bat studio with my usual test setup, Sigma's just announced 60-600 f4.5 to 6.3 DGDN Sports Super Zoom, set at 60 millimeters, just 5 feet or so from our standard test scene, proved as sharp in the center, even sharper in the corners than my brand new, more expensive, more tightly focused Sony 24-70 2.8 Mark II G Master. Okay, it was 59 millimeters, so I had to guess the focal length because it wasn't displayed in the viewfinder. Still, what the Then again, there's also being confounded by a close inspection of use cases for and alternatives to the 60-600. Hold that thought. Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant, and I will just cut to the chase. Sigma's $2,000 60-600 4.5 to 6.3 DGDN, the purpose-built for mirrorless successor to the identically top-line spec'd and priced DSLR version I reviewed 4 years ago on a 30-megapixel Canon R, is an extraordinarily versatile, keenly priced technological tour de force, given the ambitions for it, available in both Sony E and Leica L mount. Not small or light at 5.5 pounds, 15 inches long and front heavy when fully extended to 600 millimeter, it is still half a pound lighter and a whopping 9 inches shorter extended than its predecessor, with similar, although not identical optical design, and a brand new linear focus motor, which makes a big difference. Even for the urban landscape kind of guy that I am, which is an important context when considering my evaluation of the lens. I encourage you to look at that earlier review, perhaps before going any further with this one. I'll put a link in the show notes down below or somewhere up above if I can remember. But the bottom line is that I was really impressed then. But back to this new one, which we mounted on our 60 megapixel Sony a7R5. In our real world testing, thwarted by rain, mist, and clouds, mind you, instead of our usual 1.01 miles as the crow flies shots of the Chrysler building in bright, clear sunlight, we had to improvise instead and shot the Ed Koch Bridge out at about 1,000 yards through an open window. The DGDN version showed impressive sharpness at normal image sizes and viewing distances with no discernible chromatic aberration, which makes me happy. In fact, it gave Sigma's own $6,000, no optical compromise, 7.5 pound, 500 millimeter f4 a run for its money. Though poring over the images at high magnification on a 32-inch monitor, even mounted to lower resolution 47.5 megapixel Panasonic Lumix S1R, the 500 f4 beat the 60-600. It's a heck of a lens, that 500, as one would expect. Of course, I did not test at every focal length or aperture. My emphasis was on the extremes, wide open, and I've already shown you what the 60-600 did at essentially minimum focusing distance, maximum field of view at maximum aperture. But 4 years in this industry is a long time. Expectations generally have grown in line with technological advances, and my expectations specifically have grown around the advances in image quality made possible by matching the very latest lens designs to high-resolution sensors, both of which inform the gear choices we make here at Three Blind Men and an Elephant. So, while you could argue that this is the one lens to have when you're having only one, I understand. But I recently bought the one lens, one camera combination to have when I'm only having one, and that's the A7R5 and the 24-70 2.8 G Master Mark II, then again, I'm a street photographer, rarely looking to go very long, usually relying on resolution and relatively small, though exceptional glass to punch in when I need it. Though even the best glass and highest resolution full-frame sensor combination simply cannot punch in anywhere near the field of view of a 600 millimeter. On the other hand, something like this, yeah, I'm not pixel peeping. I'm not trying to turn 70 millimeters into 600. I'm just thinking to myself, wow, I couldn't get this with anything I currently own. But I ain't schlepping that 60 to 600 all over town. Still, that's just me. I know I'm not the primary audience for this lens, and the fact remains that if you need what Sigma's DGDN 60 to 600 can give you, it is the only game in town. But that if, it's a big if. The thing of it is, if you want this lens, you want it for two reasons above all others. One, you want and intend to shoot it at both ends of the range. And two, you don't want to swap lenses. Who does that? Who thinks like that? What are the actual use cases for that? Put differently, for whom and under what scenarios do the modest maximum and variable aperture, the significant weight and bulk, the freedom from futzing, fair enough, the image quality trade-off versus a dedicated prime, and the price make the most sense? For street, portrait, or event shooters? No. They don't need the range, and they don't want the bulk, weight, obtrusiveness, or slow maximum apertures. Sports or wildlife shooters? Well, yeah, maybe. High-end pro sports photographers are the primary audience for fast five-figure telephoto Uber primes, though, because they know precisely where their targets will be, when, at what relatively constant distance. And they need the fastest apertures to allow the highest shutter speeds or lowest ISO, and they can justify the expense. Beyond skill and luck, lenses like those can be the difference between the shot and being one among many. On the other hand, how much sensor resolution or lens resolving power does a pro photographer actually need for images used by a wire service or a magazine? When will he or she not have enough light at an event he or she would be asked to cover? Is the difference of 1 or 1 1/3 stops at 600 millimeters, 6.3 versus 4, going to be the difference between getting the shot or not? 2 1/3 stops between 2.8 and 6.3? Maybe. And when you aren't shooting subjects moving at relatively constant distances, say you are on the sidelines of an NFL game or just outside of the pit at a Formula One race, where you likely do have enough light, the flexibility of the 60 to 600 allowing you to go from super long to relatively wide in the blink of an eye at speeds fast enough, well, that may be exactly what you need at a bargain price. Just ask L.B. Jeffries about that prize-winning photograph he took right before a tire flying through the air hit him at speed and put him in a wheelchair for months, at which point all he could do was look out his rear window. For enthusiast sports shooters, especially weekend warrior parents, less likely to burden themselves with monopods and gimbal heads, because, hey, no matter what the IS technology, no matter what anyone says, I think these are critical for extracting the most from the gear at the long end if you intend on shooting for more than 1 minute. The 60 to 600 will almost always make more sense than an Uber Prime. It's far less expensive, much easier to use for framing, likely to be used outdoors where there's usually sufficient light. The new optical stabilization algorithm touted by Sigma purporting to offer 6 or 7 stops of stabilization may be sufficient, depending on the focal length. And there's a reasonably high probability their kids will be running all over the place so that the wide end may make more sense than a 2 to 4x range super zoom. And again, a 1-inch or sub-1-inch super zoom camera may make more sense than that, especially for weekend warrior parents. Think $400 for a 60x Lumix DCFZ80, $700 for a 65x Canon SX70HS, $1,000 for whopping 125x Nikon Coolpix 1000. Not only are they much less expensive, they are also much smaller and lighter. If you are concerned about their image quality, I understand. You could also take a look at Sony's $1,700 25x 20 megapixel 1-inch sensor-equipped RX10 Mark IV with its integrated Zeiss Sonar 2.4 to 4 zoom, the full-frame field of view equivalent of an even more flexible 24 to 600. But you know what? At either sensor size, they do what smartphones can't. And who is going to see the difference in image quality when the odds are they'll be looking at those images on a smartphone? We're talking, what, 6 square inches? It's a bit different for wildlife shooters, especially enthusiast shooters. The flexibility of an interchangeable zoom lens may exceed the need for speed of a prime. I mean, you can go from wide to narrow, so at least you can see what you're aiming at. Or on the other hand, image quality can definitely exceed what a super zoom can provide at the same field of view. But in either case, what birder who needs a 600 millimeter field of view suddenly also needs a 60 millimeter field of view? What wildlife photographer in any case is going to wander close enough to a Bengal tiger where 60 millimeters makes you anything other than lunch? What about pro wildlife shooters? They may well want the ultimate image quality and the faster constant aperture of a prime, but once again, how many are going to show their images large enough or cropped enough or shot in low enough light that the 60 to 600 won't appeal at a fraction of the price? Although again, how many will need that 60 millimeter wide end? For those of you who do shoot sports or wildlife, please let me know what you think in the comments section below. Next, landscape photographers. How about them? Possibly. They don't need fast shutter speeds to freeze the action, and they can handle long exposures to let in more light. But who wants to schlep all of that weight across the moors or highland with an even bigger tripod and a gimbal head? How many really need either end of that wide range? It seems to me that there are 3 primary targets for this lens. First and foremost, I'll be very specific here, I think the 60 to 600 probably comes close to being the ideal safari lens. I'm being serious about this. You're in a vehicle, so you don't have to carry the weight. You don't know what you'll find or when you'll find it or how far away it is. So you need flexibility and will often not have time to swap lenses. You can't exactly zoom with your feet. You certainly don't need or want to get close enough to a tiger or a bull elephant in the wild to use a 60 millimeter field of view, but for grand vista establishing shots of the Serengeti, why not? Second, workaday pros covering local field sports during the day or under bright lights. Think football, soccer, lacrosse, maybe hockey if the arena is well lit enough. Maybe baseball, although that's very predictable and not all that fast. Definitely not lawn bowling. No one needs a long lens or fast shutter speed for that. Other than baseball and lawn bowling, the action will be fast and erratic, and from the sidelines you need to be able to capture everything from downfield or across the ice to right in front of you. And Uber Prime is simply overkill, and who wants to spend between 6 and 12 large for a job that can actually be done better with a lens 1/3 to 1/6 the price? Lastly, maybe combat photographers, photojournalists, documentarians who need to keep it super simple or who don't want to run the risk of a dirty sensor because of swapping lenses, and in either case, doesn't mind the weight or obtrusiveness. I'm not certain about this one because most pros want backup bodies. Simple usually means discreet, and schlepping a big lens for hours on end is simply not great. The 60 to 600 is neither discreet nor comfortable to carry for any length of time. A Lumix G9 with a Leica DG Vario Elmert 50 to 200, the equivalent of a 100 to 400, now that's discreet. A photographer with that combo, even with a second G9 and a 12 to 60, would still be discreet, and the 20 megapixels of the G9 or 26 of the GH6 would do. Low light could be an issue, but the Leica's 2.8 to f4 variable aperture would make up for some of that. As for dynamic range, there's a difference, but it'd probably do for this kind of work, especially compared to super zooms. But the biggest advantage of Micro Four Thirds kit, the weight on one's shoulders or around one's neck at any one point in time would be a heck of a lot less. The 50 to 200 itself is less than a pound and just 7 inches when fully extended. And when mounted on the 26 megapixel GH6, the whole package is still less than 3.5 pounds. I suppose, while we're wandering beyond Sony and Leica full-frame mounts or just one camera, one might also pause to consider the APS-C combination of Fujifilm's $2,000 XF to 150 to 600, 5.6 to f8, with either of Fujifilm's 40 megapixel bodies, the X-T5 or XH2. Now we're talking the full-frame equivalent field of view of a 225 to 900 millimeter and still have a high-resolution sensor. Add Sigma's 18 to 50 2.8, and this is another great combination, dramatically lighter than any full-frame solution with comparable reach and range. call Fujifilm a Goldilocks alternative for those of us not committed to Sony, Leica, or Micro Four Thirds. So that's it really. In the end, as I said at the beginning, the DGDN 60-600 is a technological tour de force. You'll love it if you need it. Personally, I think of the DGDN 60-600 as a niche product, even a halo product, in spite of its relatively modest price, given Sigma's outsized ambitions for it. I suspect that for most folks who are in the market for an interchangeable lens for their Sony or Leica, however, especially those who already own a Holy Trinity zoom, a 24-ish to 70-ish or 70 to 200 2.8, something close by, it makes more sense if they need the reach to opt for a smaller, lighter, less expensive, or optically superior 3 or 4x super zoom telephoto. In the Sony E-mount, the choice is substantial. Sigma's own 150-600 or 100-400, Tamron's 150-500, Sony's 100-400, 200-600. In L-mount, it's a choice among the Sigmas. The 100-400 is around $900 right now, or giving up a significant amount of top end and cash for Leica's exceptional $7,300 90 to 280 2.8 to 4. In fact, I do want a longer lens than my current longest. My SL2 tops out at 90 millimeters. My A7R5 tops out at 70. But were I to buy right now, I'd rather give up the top end and the range of the 60-600 for Panasonic's 2400 3.5 pound 70 to 200 2.8 S Pro, or for our A7R5, maybe start with Sony's $2,500 lighter at 3 pounds, 100 to 400 4.5 to 5.6. Maybe give up even that top end for Sony's $2,800, still lighter at 2.5 pounds, 70 to 200 2.8 Mark II. Maybe for Claudia's Nikon Z7 II, we'd opt for their $2,700 3-pound Nikkor Z 70 to 200 2.8, perhaps their $2,700 3.2 pound 100 to 400 4.5 to 5.6, possibly even their $3,300 2.7 pound 400 4.5. But what I'd really like, and will most likely have to continue to wait for, are you listening, guys, is a no optical compromise, modestly fast mid-telephoto prime. Call it anywhere from a 180 to 300 f3 or 4, super compact, image stabilized, weather sealed. I'd be satisfied to live with whatever I could punch into, courtesy of a high resolution sensor. But as always, that's just me. I'm okay with being a statistical outlier. Your mileage may vary, and that's fine. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From custom domains to beautiful websites using their easily customizable templates that you can have up and running in minutes, e-commerce, email and email marketing, SEO, analytics, and scheduling, Squarespace does it all and has done it for us for the last 6 years. If you are a small to mid-sized business in any industry, Squarespace is the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code HUGH at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, join the conversation in the comments section below because this is an exceptional audience. If you'd like help with a portfolio review, gear selection, finding or honing your artistic voice, sign up for a one-on-one mentoring video call via Zoom at 3bmep.com/booking. Finally, please consider supporting our work by using the no-cost to you affiliate links down below, sending us coffee money via PayPal, or most especially, joining us on Patreon, links down below as well. However you choose to support us, as always, we thank you for it.